I'm honored and I thank you, Zach, for allowing me to walk alongside you and be a part of sharing your story of perseverance and resiliency to the world. I think that those are two concepts that we are not talking about enough in terms of overcoming mental health issues, overcoming really difficult life circumstances. And I'm pretty sure that after people listen to this and watch this video, that they are going to have a greater understanding of what it takes to become a resilient person who perseveres. I'd like to begin by sharing your story through this video.
Zach, get inside! Seriously. My name's Zack Collie. I have 4 children. I have Zach, Levi, Caden, and a princess named Layla. I have an awesome family. You know, I remember telling my friends, oh my gosh, I have 4 kids at 4 schools and this is crazy. And little did I know, now that seems like nothing. Okay, it was Memorial Day, 2010. We had wanted to go to a pool and barbecue at our neighbor's house, and we told Zach. And he really wanted to go to the beach with his friends, and I felt like I gave in. Like, yeah, okay, all right, fine, you know, you go. So I remember going to this pool party, and the little ones were swimming, and the barbecue was just being started, and a boy that lives there is my son Levi's age, and he came up to me and said, is Levi coming? So I went up and got my phone. I remember I noticed a voicemail message, and
we were there almost all day. We've been in the water, decided to go back out one more time. I remembered it being cold, so I decided I was just gonna run in, dive into the water, get used to it really quick. I ran to dive under a wave, hit a sandbar. I'm gonna die at 15 years old. I can't believe this happened to me. I remember being dragged. He let go of my arms. It was like they weren't even attached to my body.
the mom that drove them down there, it was her. She simply said, there's been an accident. Zach's at Hoag Hospital. You need to get down here right away. I knew it was bad. I sensed immediately this is serious. But I had no idea that it was that serious. I'm trying to dial his friend and he says, Amber, Zach's not moving. Zach's not moving. You see in the movies, Mr. and Mrs. Collie have a seat, and he said, I won't sugarcoat it. He said, it's really bad. They had done some x-rays and an MRI, and they're waiting on the results. He had, the big neck brace on, so he could hardly look over at me, but he just smiled. And for me, that moment was, he's alive. Like, he's alive. Like, I felt like it didn't matter. Like, at that moment for me, as his mom, I just felt like it doesn't matter. Like, whatever it is, he's alive. It's like, we're gonna deal with this. If Zach can live in a body that all of a sudden doesn't work, is being as active as he used to be, like knowing who he is, if he can do it with a smile on his face, then I can do it. I can sit there and walk beside him.
I have never broken a bone in my body until I broke my neck. I grew up riding dirt bikes, surfing. I was just always outdoors. I'm always hanging out with my friends.
He is paralyzed. He lost the function of his body, and from day one, chose to move forward, and I think we kind of followed suit. It did happen. It did happen to our family, and there's nothing that can change that. But that doesn't mean he can't have a good life. It doesn't mean everything stops and we just feel sorry for ourselves and curl up in a ball and hide.
Zach can face life with those challenges and not complain. Causes me not to complain as much either.
This injury could happen to anybody. Therapy and rehab was just what we did.
When I first got hurt, I couldn't even push my wheelchair on my own. And so that was a big struggle for me because I had no freedom. I couldn't go anywhere on my own. Just like simple things you take for granted.
His legs, they shake to the point where we actually strap him down. We tie him down at night. So he is 7 to 10 hours, depending on how long he sleeps, in the same position. If he just wants to sit on the couch, what it takes to get him from his now wheelchair to the couch to the bed.
If I want something, a glass of water, to brush my teeth, I always have to wait for someone to do it for me. and sometimes that's really frustrating. One of the biggest things I've had to learn is patience. Would give anything to have my independence back, but now going to school, getting my life on the right track to get out in the world and eventually be independent on my own one day is what drives me. I'm gonna get there one day, it's just gonna take a little longer. I like to tell people I'm still the same person I was before my accident. I wanna have a family one day and live on my own, have a house. I love to go to concerts, go to the beach, yeah, I'm still me.
I get amazed and blessed to watch Zack's coping with life because it gives me inspiration.
We work a lot on like upper body in hopes of one day that I'll be able to transfer myself like into my chair, into a seat. That's a big goal we have.
It's very important. His body gets moved, gets worked out, doesn't atrophy. There's definitely something about giving back. Just seems like the most natural thing to do.
I've grown a lot more compassionate for others too. It's made me definitely want to help more people. Don't take life for granted. Be appreciative for what you have. Never give up. Persevere.
I don't think that anybody can argue after watching that video that resiliency is now a strength of yours. And it was obtained through what we call perseverance. And so I'd really like to know, what does resiliency mean to you? And how would you describe it to other people? And then how did it shape your journey in breaking your neck and becoming a quadriplegic?
I think for me, I view resiliency as a mindset. It's something that I've learned over the years after my injury, going through hard times. It's not something I was born with. I wasn't born with this special gift of resiliency. I think it's something that is found within us that we all have access to. And for me, it was really my injury, me breaking my neck, that forced me to tap into my inner resiliency. And from then, really just choose every day to move forward no matter what I was going through.
I think resiliency is that ability to bounce back, whether it be from trauma, it be from a mental health issue, it be from some sort of relational issue that you're having. But that ability to bounce back does not mean that you become what you were before, right? It's somehow a growth. It's something where you're taking steps forward, which is so clear in the story that we watched of you. And so as I think about somebody who's resilient, I think that you're right. You can't be born with it, right? There are some people who maybe have personalities that make it easier to obtain, but it is something that we get through little choices, putting one foot in front of the other, maybe even just taking half a step and then taking that same half a step over and over again. I think that what stands out to me the most is that being resilient, persevering, is a decision. Can you remember a moment where you made a decided decision to persevere, which led to your being a resilient person?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to start by saying, I believe that anyone can become resilient, but not everyone chooses to be resilient. And so thinking back for me, the first time I felt like I tapped into my inner resilience was after my accident. I woke up in the hospital and doctors had just told me that I had broken my neck. I was diagnosed as a quadriplegic. I had just been in a serious accident. And at that time, I couldn't move anything below my neck. So I was fully paralyzed from the neck down. I couldn't bring my hand to my face to scratch an itch. I had to have help doing that. And so doctors are telling me all this information. I'm 15 years old. I'm not fully grasping the reality of my injury. I thought if you broke your neck, you died. I didn't think you could live through a broken neck. And so I just think being young and not understanding the severity of what happened, I didn't fully grasp my reality. And so doctors, gave me all this information, and then they kind of left me to be by myself, and my parents came in and talked with me, and they're trying to hold themselves together. And my dad had this personal talk with me, and then I just remember kind of just asking to be by myself just to process everything. And I had no idea what to do. It felt like my whole life was in a split second turned upside down. My life was over before it even began. And here I am, 15 years old, laying in a hospital bed, fully paralyzed from the neck down. And so I remember having an internal conversation with myself about what I was going to do and how I was going to move forward. And at the end, I came to two conclusions. I realized that focusing on what I lost wasn't going to help me move forward. And so I decided I could either move forward and create a future for myself, even though I didn't know how I was going to do that. And to be honest, it felt extremely hopeless. I didn't know how to overcome something as serious and big as what I was going through. Or I could give up and feel sorry for myself. Those are really the only two options that I saw. I could get bitter or I could get better. And so even though I didn't know how I was going to get better, that was the route that I chose to go down. And I feel like that was my first decision to tap into my inner resilience, to choose to bounce back from this obstacle that I didn't know how I was going to overcome.
Man, I love that. I can choose to get bitter or I can choose to get better. It has nothing to do with trying to control outside people, places, things, and events. And I think as humans, we get so focused on, okay, I need to figure out how to control this, this, and this. And you had to give all that up. There was no control. I can choose internally to get bitter, or I can choose to get better. And I don't think most people can fathom coming to that conclusion as a 15-year-old, let alone a 15-year-old who's just experienced being paralyzed. That's incredible.
It's interesting because I think back to that time and how I was able to think that way and make those decisions. And I don't know how. I don't know why I was able to do that, but I do know that at that time, I was not willing to accept what happened to me, and I wasn't willing to let those circumstances control my entire future.
It's interesting because I met you once you got to a point where you were already very much in the swing of being resilient and persevering, and I met you via Zoom, hiring you. And it was such an interesting conversation because I was interviewing you, and quite frankly, I hate interviewing people, man. It is the bane of my existence. But it was a very pleasant interview. You answered the questions well. And then you said, hey, I got to tell you something. I had just offered you the job, and my heart sank. And I'm thinking, here we go. Because I got a lot of, hey, I got to tell you some things from people. And you said, well, I'm a quadriplegic. And so selfishly, my mind went, oh, sweet. Feel bad for saying that now. But I said, oh, sweet internally because there was no selfishness coming out of, hey, I got to tell you something. There was no, oh, I need accommodations or anything like that. And in fact, you're a quadriplegic who came into my practice and asked for 0 accommodations. I almost had to say, why don't we do this to make it a little bit easier? And your response would always be, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And so it's mind-blowing to have met you in terms of hiring you, because you were one of the only people that I had interviewed. Out of 50 people in that period of time, you were the only one that didn't ask for anything special. And that shows so much character. And it shows that, to me, it shows that perseverance is now a huge part of your identity, and that resilience is the result. And so I'll never forget that moment of meeting you.
I remember that interview, and it was a little nerve-wracking because I knew that I was going to tell you about my situation, and I waited till the end because I didn't want to start with that. But I knew by the end of this interview, I needed to tell you, that I'm in a wheelchair, I'm a quadriplegic, and I feel like part of what's helped me just be successful is being honest and open. Mm-hmm. And if people judge me and I don't get a job because of my situation, then that wasn't the right fit for me.
Yeah.
But I wanted to set myself up to be successful. And I feel like in order to do that, I need to be honest and open about the reality of my situation. So I appreciate you for being open and accommodating and so accepting of me being in a chair. And I'm glad that here we are today.
You know, you broke your neck being out in the surf, and I imagine just seeing pictures and getting to know you. I don't imagine you as being this quaint, compliant child. I imagine you a lot like me, kind of a punk surfer kid who pushes the boundaries and doesn't want or need help for many things. And as I imagine that in you, it makes me really curious. Describe, what was it like to go from being somebody who's pushing the boundaries, maybe doing a little bit of defiant stunts, to needing help with everything?
Yeah, I think that was probably one of the hardest things that I had to go to, was transitioning from being a very independent person to now being completely dependent for simple daily tasks. And I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. I'm the older brother. I have 3 younger siblings. And growing up, I played the role of the older brother very well, with pride, picking on my siblings. And my mom would always tell me that I was more work than my 3 younger siblings combined. She could tell that it was me coming in the front door by the way the screen door slammed behind me, you know. And I was the type of kid that would have had my bags packed by the front door the day of my 18th birthday, ready to move out and just start experiencing life. So very independent, very physical. I was athletic, and completely losing that in a split second was extremely hard for me to accept. One day I'm in the ocean at the beach with friends, and the next day I'm in the hospital fully paralyzed. And so I think just losing the independence was very, very difficult for me. And I'm talking about, I now had to have help with simple daily tasks that everybody does, I think, without even thinking about it. Things like getting up to get a glass of water when you're thirsty. You know, you're sitting on the couch, you're watching TV, oh, I'm thirsty. I stand up, get in the fridge, grab a water bottle. I can't do that anymore. I lost the ability to cut my fingernails or pop a pimple on my face. And I think I took those things for granted. You don't realize the privilege of being able to do those things until it's all taken away from you. And I think that was the biggest thing for me to grasp. It was those little things. Those little things were even almost more difficult to accept, rather than the fact that I had to accept I can't walk anymore.
You know, it's interesting because when I'm working with clients, that recognition of the little things, or maybe starting on the little things, right? That appreciation of what is for right now, rather than getting stuck in what you wish could be, is a really big attitude shift that most people can't. I shouldn't say can't, don't choose to make, right? And so you clearly shifted your focus, but I'm curious, that the emotional toll of being reliant, losing your independence, was obviously difficult, but you navigated it. Do you mind sharing how in the world you navigated the emotional toll that loss had to have taken?
I mean, I would be lying if I wouldn't admit there was nights of just crying and just being pissed off and frustrated that this was my situation, this was my reality, and having thoughts of, you know, why me? Why did this happen to me? Did I do something to deserve this? And then I think what also played a big role is because I was 15 when it happened, and I didn't understand the severity of this, it was hard for me to accept right away. I remember right when my injury happened, I think a few months after, I was supposed to fly out to another state to visit one of my best friends that I grew up with. I had already had the plane ticket bought. It was happening. And then my injury happened. And still, even after being told by the doctors that you broke your neck, you have spinal cord damage, you're quadriplegic, this is a serious, severe injury, I still thought I was gonna be on that plane a few months later, flying out to my buddies to see him. And I focused on that, I held on to that. And then 2 months go by, I'm still paralyzed. trip gets canceled, it's not happening. Okay. Then a few months later was my 16th birthday. I'm out of the hospital, I'm out of rehab, I'm back in home, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe things will start changing by then. Still paralyzed, nothing different. Then I go back to school, same thing. A few months later, nothing's really changed. Then another year goes by. And I think for me, it was a slow acceptance of the reality of what I was going through, rather than if I was a 30-year-old adult with a stable job, I would have been more mature and understood the severity of this injury. And it was a slow, gradual acceptance rather than something that just hit me all at once, that was overwhelming and maybe would have caused someone to go straight to depression. And so I definitely had difficult moments, difficult nights, and just I think that slow acceptance helped me to have this mindset of keep moving forward every day, no matter what, no matter how little it is, and not to focus on the things that I lost, which was pretty much everything.
So obviously asking for help was a skill you had to learn, right? And I mean, you needed help with everything. And so, number one, what was that learning process of, hey, I got to learn to ask for help? I imagine there were some pitfalls. I imagine there's some things that got lost in translation maybe. And then what advice would you have for somebody who really sucks at asking for help?
Oh man, that was again, I'll probably say this a lot, but another one of the hard things for me after my injury was learning to ask for help. And I think for me, being a 15-year-old teenager, being very independent, I like to do things on my own. It was something I think I took pride in. I didn't want to ask people for help. I viewed asking for help as a sign of weakness. And so I think that played a role in why it was so hard for me to ask for help. But then I got put into a position where I didn't have a choice. I had to have help for certain things. And it was just very hard. It made me feel weak. It was uncomfortable for me to ask for help, especially the help that I was getting. I mean, I'm talking about my mom showering me at 15, 16 years old, seeing me naked and dressing me for the day, putting my shoes on, helping me brush my teeth, cook food for me. Like all these things, it was already hard enough to ask for help, but then have to ask for help for things I felt I already should be able to do that I can now no longer do. I think by learning to ask for help and kind of turning away from my ego and my pride and learning to be okay with that helped me to learn to be patient, which was also something that I struggled with as a teenager. I lacked patience, and I learned patience through having to have help through with things. And now it's funny because I have no issue now asking for help for things. Even when I'm out and about, if I'm by myself and my phone falls on the ground and I have to just sit outside waiting for a stranger to randomly walk by, and I'll ask them for help. And I have no problem with that now. I don't view it as a sign of weakness. And I view it as, for the other person, they're doing a good deed for someone that needs help with something. So I'm hoping that they feel good after that, and maybe they can view it as like they did their good deed for the day, and I get my phone back on my lap and I can go on with my day. So I feel like if you're struggling with asking for help, ask yourself, why is it so hard for you? And more likely than not, if you do ask for help for whatever that is, there's going to be someone there that's going to be willing to do it. It's been very rare in my personal experience when I need help with something and I ask someone for help and they've told me no.
I can't imagine saying no to you. And that I had two thoughts as you were talking about that. Number one, getting over the ego of asking for help is one thing, and then asking for help clearly is another step in being able to move forward with somebody's help. But there's this, when you ask for help, you need the help. And like you said, I like how you put it, hey, people are thankful to help you. We can take pride. We need opportunities to help others, right? One of the principal concepts, one of the most important concepts in overcoming addiction is the idea that you help others who are struggling. And so in any mental health issue, I believe that helping others is a part of the recovery. Now, there's a caveat to asking for help. Asking for help isn't always healthy. Asking for help when you don't need it or you're not willing to accept it becomes damaging both to you, the person who you're asking for help from, and it creates resentments. It creates some of these stuck points. And so I think as I'm imagining you ask for help, whether it be simple or big, it's you need it, you're grateful, and you're using it to move forward, right? And I've seen that in your character anytime you've asked me for help, or you don't ask for help frivolously. And I think that's an important piece that not a lot of people talk about.
I agree. I think there's that side of asking for help for things that you really don't need help with, but you're either, I guess, lazy or don't want to do it. And then there's the other side of actually asking for things that you do need help with. Yeah. And I think for me, because I know I need help with these things and I've accepted it, it's easier to ask for help. And I feel like learning to ask for help and being okay with it has helped me grow into the person I am today, and played a role in just me learning to be patient and accepting that there are going to be times in my life where there's things that I will need help with that I don't have control over.
So on the one end, we want to make sure our pride doesn't get in the way of us asking for help. And then on the other end, we want to make sure that our stuckness, maybe laziness or hang-ups, don't cause us to ask for help that leads to enabling us.
Yes.
Okay, so you mentioned patience and you mentioned gratitude. Those are two very important concepts for resilient people. And in order to persevere, you have to find things to be grateful for. You have to be patient. I'm curious, how would you define gratitude and patience, and how's it played a role in your story?
I think for me, to define gratitude would be to find the good in every situation, whether it's a good situation or a bad situation. I personally believe it doesn't matter if it's good or bad, there's always something positive you can take away from a situation that you go through. And that's what I've really learned through this injury, and what I've chose to focus on is, you know what, this is my reality. I'm in a wheelchair, I'm paralyzed, I can't fix that, but I can still focus on the things I have and the things that I'm grateful for. I'm still grateful that I have my voice, I have my brain, I'm still alive. I could be 6 feet in the ground right now and my parents would be visiting my gravestone every year, but I'm still alive, even though I am paralyzed, and I'm okay with that. I'd rather still be alive in a wheelchair than be dead and in the ground. And so teaching myself to look for the things to be grateful for every day has completely, I think, just changed my life. When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about is just being grateful for another day. I have a house, I have a car. There's all these things in my life that I'm grateful for, whether they're super small, if it's waking up and it's a warm sunny day, or if it's a big thing, I have an adaptive vehicle that I can drive that gives me my independence. Grateful for that. I don't focus on the things that I can't control or I can't change, or that I'm even unhappy about. I don't even allow myself to entertain or focus on the things that I wish I could do, or I wish I had, or I used to have. I'm only really focusing on the things that I can control and that I still have. And by doing that, it's really just rewired my brain to always be focusing on the good things I'm grateful for.
And it's so obvious in your day-to-day life, at least for me, the positive presence that you bring into every situation is overwhelming sometimes, and it's obvious. Your grateful attitude is something I've seen both through what you voice, how you carry yourself in conversations, is such an obvious trait of who you are in your identity. And so the patience piece, you have to be patient. Kind of like some other things, you don't have any choice. And I remember one time you telling me a story of patience. You were waiting for your mom or something, but maybe you can share that story. But tell us more about that role of patience in not just you becoming resilient, but you being able to have relationships.
So when my injury first happened, my mom took on the role of being my primary caregiver. And that was really hard at the time because I'm a 15-year-old teenager, you know, stuck in my immature ways. And I love my parents. I have the best relationship with them. They're my best friends now. But back then, we definitely tended to butt heads a lot. And so I'm around my mom every day now. She's helping me with these daily tasks. And I didn't really have a choice but to be patient. And the times I was impatient, it really complicated things. And you know, an example of that would be when, you know, I'm sitting at home and maybe I'm hungry or I'm thirsty, and you know, I wanted to go get some food or a drink, but my mom is, you know, in the shower getting ready for the day, and I have to wait till she finishes showering, she gets dressed, and she comes back out to the living room, and then I gotta ask her for what I want, and by then it's, you know, however much time later, so I'm already kind of just irritated and annoyed because it's something that I had to ask for and I just couldn't do on my own. And then, you know, she doesn't know what's going through my head, but by then I'm already just kind of frustrated, and I asked her for my glass of water or some food, and you know, she makes it, and you know, by then it's a lot more time has gone by, and then maybe I get it and it's not exactly how I would have made it, and then I'm more frustrated, and then I take it out on her, you know, and it's just this cycle that I go through. And I ended up realizing, she had actually had a conversation with me one time, and she's like, Zach, I don't mind doing anything for you. I will do anything for you, but I don't want to do things for you when you treat me this way. And that was a really hard thing to hear from my mom, because on one side, I understood it's not fair for me to take out my anger and frustration on someone that loves me and is helping me and is willing to do anything for me. But on the other side, I was angry about these things, and I felt like it wasn't fair for me not to acknowledge those frustrations, but it also wasn't fair for me to take it out on my mom. And so I had to really sit with that and think about it and figure out a way to still allow myself to be frustrated, but then not to take it out on someone that doesn't deserve it.
You know, that reminds me of so many clients you and I work with, right? They are stuck because of depression or anxiety, things that they can't control. And they know, to some extent, the hopeless and helpless feelings that you've had to wrestle with. And not having hope sometimes ruins your patience, right? So often clients come in and work with us, and you know, a month later they're going, I don't think we're making the progress that we should, or their family's impatient with their lack of progress, or you know, both them and their family are impatient with their lack of progress. And that often turns to anger. And anger is the result of not being patient. And what's interesting about not being patient is it prolongs whatever growth, healing, or progress you need or want to make. And so it's interesting to hear your story of your mom confronting you, because your reaction was to listen, it sounds like. It sounds like a part of your perseverance, a part of your becoming a resilient person was taking that negative feedback. And in this day and age, let's be honest, people are absolutely unequivocally horrible at taking negative feedback. And you know, and some of the responses are, oh, well, I'm just too overwhelmed by the negative feedback. Oh, all you focus on is the negativity in me, and which usually isn't true. But you took that negative feedback and you grew from it. And I admire that. And I think that's something that everybody listening to this right now needs to remember. Hey, look, don't take it personally. When you get negative feedback, look at that as an opportunity.
I love that you said that. Criticism can be an opportunity. One of the things that I've learned is that instead of viewing negative situations, criticisms, or a difficult challenge as a negative, and having the thoughts of, why is this happening to me? Why did I deserve this? What did I do? You know, kind of having these negative thoughts. Instead, viewing that situation as, what can I learn from this? What can this teach me? that completely changed things for me. And I think allowed me to be more open to constructive criticism because I'm viewing that as, okay, how can this help me grow? Rather than like, I don't like this makes me feel uncomfortable.
We're kind of talking about overcoming that mental side of things. You've had to both overcome mentally and physically. And so many people, as I said before, they're stuck, right? They're stuck in their own mental health issues. They're stuck in their unfortunate circumstances. They tell me, I can't move forward, right? And we almost view mental health as this magical thing that some people can overcome and some people can't. And I mentioned being stuck, and we deal with so many people who come in saying that they're stuck. And as a therapist, our job is to use theory, use these interventions to lead them to a place where they're unstuck. And a lot of people look at being stuck and then getting unstuck as almost this magical thing. They're looking for us to give them magic, and there's no magic, right? And they get in this stuck feeling where they convince themselves that they can't get out of bed. They cannot go into that situation that makes them very anxious. And so I'm curious what you think about people who are stuck in being completely unhappy. And I know that's a huge question. You can't answer it all today, but what do you have to say for somebody who's stuck?
I would say the first thing is you're not alone. I think every single person at some point in their life gets stuck. And what I would say to that is when I was first injured and I was going to physical therapy and I was doing my workouts, there would be times when my trainer would want me to try to do a movement that I couldn't do. And I would try and I would get frustrated and I would say, I can't do that. And I'll never forget this because this trainer told me, Zach, you need to remove that word from your vocabulary. I don't want to hear you say I can't do it, because you can. And at first I was kind of like annoyed and pissed off because I really was trying. I was trying to move a body part and it wouldn't move. And when it wouldn't move, I would get frustrated, then I want to give up and quit. And the reason I say that is because I think it's important what we tell ourselves. If we're telling ourselves we can't do this, or I'm always anxious, I'm always depressed, what we tell ourselves is going to have an impact on how we feel and then how we believe. And so I really had to switch my thinking and tell myself, okay, even if I am anxious or if I'm trying to make a body part move and it's not working, keep trying, keep going at it. If it doesn't work, then move forward. Just keep moving forward, even if things aren't working out. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck is they go in this like loop or this cycle in their head of I can't do this, can't do this. And if you tell yourself you can't do something, how are you ever going to do it? It's almost like I heard this saying where a negative mind will never give you a positive life.
I love that. And if our thing that we're stuck on becomes our identity, like I am an anxious person, rather than I'm a person with many facets who happens to be stuck in anxiety right now, then that when it becomes our identity, it does become something that is impossible to overcome. When it becomes something that we need to figure out how to navigate around, that becomes totally different. And with your story, you can't move. That isn't going to change. But as I say that, I realize, wait a second, there are movements that you didn't have that you now have. And your movement is getting better. And your identity is not as a quadriplegic. Your identity is as a husband. It is as a father, soon to be father again. It is as a therapist and so many more, friend, etc. And so that stuckness becomes so overwhelming if you only focus on that one thing that you seemingly don't have control over. And like you said, you do have control over what you're saying out loud, what you're saying internally, what you're writing, what you're talking about. You can choose to have more actions, more behaviors that are negative, rather than actions that are positive. And what comes to mind is that old adage, fake it till you make it. Well, there's some serious wisdom in that, you know? So I appreciate that. Let's talk about hope for a second.
All right.
For you, we all know what it's like to feel hopeless about something. Can you tell us about your hopeless thoughts?
I remember feeling extremely hopeless about my life and my future after my injury. I couldn't envision a positive future as a quadriplegic. And so when my injury first happened to me, and kind of going back to that period when I was laying in the bed and had that internal conversation with myself, there was a lot of struggling with finding hope and what that would look like. And it's actually funny because a few years later, I was at Panda Express eating some Chinese food, and I cracked open my fortune cookie and read my fortune. And I still remember it to this day. I kept that fortune for years. It said, "He who has hope has everything." And I thought that was some Panda Express wisdom, but I ended up taking that with me, and I taped that fortune cookie on the wall next to my bed so I could see it every night when I went to sleep and every morning when I woke up. And I soon realized the power and importance of having hope, even if it's super tiny. And it makes me think of one of my favorite verses in the Bible that talks about hope and perseverance. And it's Romans 5:3-5. And it says that not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And we need to have hope to hold on to. And so I want to go back to that fortune cookie that said, "He who has hope has everything." And for me, that just completely changed my perspective and how I viewed my situation in my life. That as long as I had hope, that's all I needed. And it didn't matter if it was the hope of walking again or the hope of being alive. Whether or not I walked again didn't matter, but I had hope for my future. And it wasn't that I knew exactly how my future was going to turn out and how it was going to be. I had no idea how I was going to navigate my future and create something of my life. But it was that I had hope that it was a possibility. And because of that, I took small steps every day, every year, for years to get to where I am today. And now I see the benefit of having hope, even if it's super small.
I love that. The idea of having small hope, right? Hope for something small, I think, is the key. Because, and then being realistic, you have to be realistic with your hope, right? Finding hope is a concept that we don't talk about much. We say it, but I don't think we think about it. Finding hope means you're searching for hope. It doesn't mean that you continue to perseverate on the thing that you lost hope in because it's not available to you anymore. I'm going to find hope in the small things, and then I'm going to find hope in the medium-sized things, and then I'm going to find hope in things I didn't even think of for my life, and then I'm going to find hope in being a quadriplegic who helps hundreds of people a year, if not more, and has more to give than I could ever take. You know, and that, I think, is one piece to your story that's so important for people to walk away with today. In saying that, what we're really talking about is finding purpose, finding an identity, right? And let's be honest, you cannot have hope. You cannot overcome fully any mental health issue. You're not going to find peace after turmoil in relationship or trauma if you don't have or find some sort of purpose or many purposes in life. And so I'm curious about how finding purpose has played a role in your story.
No, I think that's extremely important. And it's interesting because my injury has actually given my life purpose and meaning. And I think purpose and meaning that's bigger than anything that in my previous life could have happened that would have given me any type of purpose. My injury has turned me into a person I never imagined becoming, but one that I'm extremely proud of today. And one of the amazing things about finding purpose in pain is that when you do that, it makes the pain less painful. Finding purpose through my injury took away a lot of that pain that I was dealing with on a daily basis. Not physical pain, but that mental pain of waking up every morning stuck in my bed until a caregiver comes to get me out of it so I can go on with my day. The pain of waking up every single day not being able to move. But despite dealing with that, and a lot of those things that I previously mentioned of needing help, getting dressed for the day, getting my shoes on, cutting my fingernails, brushing my hair, all of those things that I lost 15 years ago, I still can't do to this day. But that doesn't matter because my life has significant purpose and meaning. I get to help people. I get to inspire others. And that reward and gratification I get from helping other people outweighs every single negative thing that I got to go through on a daily basis.
Wow. That's such an incredible mindset. And again, it is essential for resiliency. As you were kind of talking about the finding your purpose through pain, right? And I like how you put it. When you find purpose through pain, the pain subsides, maybe even goes away. And that's something that I think a lot of people who are stuck or feeling hopeless can sink their teeth into, because a lot of our focus, even in therapy, is we focus on fixing it, we focus on fixing it, we focus on fixing it, and some things can't be fixed. But I do believe that every painful thing that happens, if we try hard enough, we can find some sort of purpose. It might not be as grand as helping hundreds of people a year, but small steps are important. You can find small, little itty bits of purpose so that you can take that next step forward. So as we talk about being stuck, that there's a concept that I talk about constantly, and that's being comfortably miserable. And that's when somebody is comfortable, not happy, they're still miserable, but they're almost comfortable in their unhealthy habits and their stuckness, right? Whether it be they're going back to some unhealthy person in a relationship, or it be an addiction that they're stuck in, or it be stuck in the habits that perpetuate their anxiety or their depression. But I'm comfortably miserable doing the things that don't work over and over again. And that, I believe, is something that really keeps people stuck, is that it is uncomfortable, it feels like sacrifice, it is not fun, and sometimes it emotionally or maybe even physically hurts to take a step forward and get unstuck. And so I know that you and I have had a lot of talks about that concept, but how does that relate to your story and the message that you have for people?
Man, this injury has forced me to do so many things that were outside of my comfort zone and that made me feel uncomfortable. And at the time, I never wanted to do those things. And anything such as I've spoke before, sharing my injury in front of crowds, and I get nervous being the center of attention, and I don't like all eyes on me, and speaking in front of crowds gives me anxiety, and I never wanted to do those things. But despite feeling that way, I would do them anyways. And looking back, I can see how much growth has happened by me doing things that made me feel uncomfortable. And I've really learned to embrace things that make me uncomfortable because I see the impact that it has on me as a person and helping me grow into a person that I wasn't the day before. And so now I like to embrace challenges. I like to do things that I maybe normally wouldn't do because I know it's going to help me become a better person. And I think about like working out as an example. A lot of times I don't want to work out, but I do it because I know it's good for my body. I know it's good to keep range of motion and keep my muscles from atrophying. But there's a lot of times, even though I know it's good for me, I don't want to do it. But then after a workout, pushing myself to that workout, there's never been one time where I finish it and been like, yeah, you know what? I was right. I shouldn't have done that. I feel worse than I do now than I did before. And kind of when I think about doing those public speaking engagements that I've done, I would have so much anxiety up to it. But then when it was done and I would get the feedback from the people, it felt so good. And not once has there been a time when I've put myself in a position like that and I came out from it being like, you know what, that actually was not a good turnout. I feel worse than I did before. Usually when I push myself to do things I don't want to do, even if it may not turn out the way I wanted it to, I feel better because I did something that made me nervous and I overcame it and pushed through.
That's so essential for overcoming and becoming resilient, especially in mental health. I often tell my clients, practice doing things that are uncomfortable. Go get uncomfortable. I don't care if it's talking to somebody that's uncomfortable, showing up somewhere, and I don't even care if you follow through. Try to do it, then try to do it again, and then try to do it again. And I think that we're so busy trying to make people feel good. We as therapists have forgotten that most of the journey is really uncomfortable, and our clients don't always like us, appreciate us, or want to come see us. And if you have a client as a therapist who always wants to come and see you, you might want to second guess what you're doing, right? But I can appreciate that. You have to train your brain, rewire your brain to cope with and experience being uncomfortable. And that just takes repetition. Again, no magic.
Yeah.
There's no magic in it.
Challenge yourself.
With anything, start small.
It's not complicated. It's very easy to find things to do that are challenging and that push you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
But it's hard to actually follow through with it.
And that means if you're stuck over here, you might have to work on getting uncomfortable somewhere else in your life so that you can wire your brain to get unstuck over here.
This injury has taught me to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That makes sense. But again, I've grown so much in that uncomfortability that I wouldn't take it back anything.
I want to quickly touch on the fact that these uncomfortable things that we do become daily habits. You mentioned working out, the daily habit of working out, the daily habit of eating healthfully, the daily habit of saying kind things to your family members, right? So there's all these daily habits that we take for granted, we don't think of, that lead to a life of perseverance and resiliency. And so I'm curious, number one, if you agree with me, I'm pretty sure that you do, but number two, how has that played a role in your life? What things did you have to kind of do on a daily basis? Maybe it has to do with nutrition, maybe it has to do, what are some of the small daily habits you had to start out with?
Man, going way back to when my injury first happened, I think I had to relearn how to feed myself. And man, I can't tell you how good it felt the first time I was able to hold a fork and put a bite of food in my mouth. And it's really funny because when my injury first happened and I couldn't move anything below my neck, I had to have other people literally feed me. And so for the first 2 weeks, it was actually kind of cool. I don't know why, but having someone else feed you, and I had that before my injury, I had that mindset. And my mom always called me like, you act like you're King Tut walking around and everyone does everything for you. And so that's where my mind went when I was having to get fed. But after a while, it got super annoying. I got over it really quick. And so that was something I had to work on in physical therapy or occupational therapy, was relearning how to feed myself. And once I was able to do that, that was something I became extremely grateful for. I think another thing, being able to scratch an itch on my body or my face. When I was first injured, I couldn't move anything below my neck. And when I would have an itch on my face, I'd have to have my mom come over and be like, Mom, I got an itch. It's on my left cheek. Scratch up higher, move to the left. Okay, scratch harder. All these little things that I took for granted that I had to relearn or figure out a new way of doing.
Yeah, practice over and over again.
Practicing it over and over again. And those are little things that I learned to be grateful for every day. And then so when I wake up in the morning, I think about, I'm grateful that I have another good day today. I got to go do things. I got to run errands that I maybe don't want to do, but I'm grateful that I'm alive and I have errands to go run and things to go do.
Ooh, I love that. What you're saying is that your gratefulness led you to a place where you could follow through with daily habits, and your daily habits was everything from having a good attitude to the daily habit of practicing scratching an itch, the daily habit of feeding yourself the daily habits that led to you being able to run errands. And without that consistent and persistent perseverance of doing things over and over again, big and small, you wouldn't be my foodie brother, right? So thank the Lord that you can feed yourself, because one joy that you and I share is talking restaurants, talking food, and for you, tell everybody what your favorite food is.
I'm obsessed with chilaquiles right now.
Yeah.
If I'm going out to brunch, on a weekday or a weekend, and that place has got chilaquiles, that's what I'm ordering every time.
And so I think a lot of people don't understand when a therapist tells them to work on their schedule and their daily habits. We're not talking about the big schedule. We're talking about repeating things over and over again until you finally get it. So I appreciate that message. You have a tattoo, and I'd like you to share what that tattoo is with everybody and just kind of the meaning behind it and how it came to be.
A few years after my injury, when I finally turned 18, I got my very first tattoo, and that was a memorial of my injury. And my second tattoo, I got the word persevere on my inner bicep. And that word holds a special place in my heart, and I put it on a spot in my body where I can wake up every morning, I can see it every day, and it's a constant reminder for me to continue moving forward every single day, whether it's a little step or a big step, no matter what. And to me, it's a reminder just to never give up. Doesn't matter what I'm going through, how bad it gets, I can overcome whatever life throws my way. But it's hard to always maintain that mentality, especially when one bad thing happens after another and it feels like everything's going wrong. But I can look at that word and be reminded that, hey, I've gotten this far. I've already gotten to a point where I never even expected to get to. So why can't I keep going that direction? And just a constant reminder for me. And it ties to one of my favorite verses that I mentioned earlier, how suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And through perseverance, I have hope. And if I have hope, then I can keep moving forward.
Yeah. And all of that leads to being a resilient person.
Yes.
Okay, so as we get towards the end here, you have a challenge for everybody that I think gives them perspective. Perspective is important as we listen to your story of perseverance and resiliency. Do you mind sharing that exercise with everybody?
Yes, absolutely. Man, so one of the things that I wish any person could experience is what it's like to be paralyzed, because it's very hard to describe, and it's something that you really can't fully grasp and understand unless you are paralyzed. But I found a really cool exercise that I like to share with people, and I think it's the closest you can get to trying to understand what it's like to be paralyzed, what it's like to tell your body to do something and it doesn't do that. And so what it is if you're sitting down right now, I want you to put both your feet flat on the ground, sit down and put both your hands on your legs. And I'm gonna talk with my left hand because it's easier, but you can do this with either hand. But make a fist with your hand and rest it on your leg. And with your left hand, stick out your ring finger. Once your ring finger is stuck out, I want you to push down into your leg with the palm of your hand, the backside by your wrist. Push down, and then with your ring finger, try to lift your ring finger up off your leg. And what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to not move. And that's the closest I can get someone to understand kind of what it's like to be paralyzed, where you're telling your body to do something, you're telling your finger to lift up off your leg, but nothing's happening. And that's what it's like to be paralyzed. Telling your body to walk, to stand, to move, to roll over, to point, and none of that works.
I think that in that message of yours and in that perspective that you give people, not being able to physically move would bring so much hopelessness and helplessness. And in spite of that little feeling, in spite of being helpless in many ways, a resilient person can achieve so much, just an unbelievable amount. In fact, with your story, achieve things that he would not have been able to achieve without having been paralyzed.
And I've shared this with you before, and I'll say it again because it's honest truth. I believe that right now, at 30 years old, I've accomplished more in my life than I would have in my entire previous life had my injury not happened.
Amazing.
So I know I've gotten way farther than I could have ever imagined, and I have that much farther to go.
So as we close here, we talked about a lot. What somebody who's just stuck, they don't see themselves as being a resilient person. They aren't right now able to persevere. What would you tell them? What do you want them to either walk away with, or what one message would you give them to get them started?
So when I was in high school, I had a history teacher that said something during class that I have never forgotten. And this was probably a year after my injury, so I was still newly injured, adjusting to my new life, now living in a body that doesn't work. And I was sitting in class one day, thankfully paying attention that day, because if I'm being honest, I didn't always pay attention in class. But he said these 3 words. For some reason, they've burned into my brain, and I've used them kind of like a life motto of mine over these past 15 years. And I hope that if you're maybe in a season of being stuck right now or feeling hopeless, that you can lean on these words and use them as motivation, as I have. And I can't remember the context that my teacher used them in, but I just remember him saying these words: improvise, adapt, and overcome. And since then, anytime I go through something that scares me or that's challenging me or that I don't know how I'm going to get through, I think about those 3 words: improvise, adapt, and overcome. And by doing that, it's helped me get to where I am today.
Improvise, adapt, overcome is such a powerful message. And what I love about it is when you're faced with that big thing, that big stuckness, whatever it might be in your life, you have to improvise because things aren't like they were and you can't go backwards. You've got to navigate, right? Improvise. Adapt. Well, the adapting comes from I'm making a new decision, a different decision. I'm adapting by accepting the things that I cannot change. And as I'm on that journey of accepting the things I cannot change, I'm trying things here, I'm trying things there. I'm making those decisions for habits every day, trying new things, right? Improvise, adapt, and then overcome. Overcoming is not a one-shot deal. You overcome every time you improvise, every time you make a decision that is adapting, and then all those small little pieces of overcoming something become that one major, I just overcame something so big that my life has found new meaning, has found new purpose, and I am a better version of what I could have been before my difficult situation. And so, Zach, your story is so inspiring. It is something that I know is going to help countless people in this world. And once again, I just want to end this by saying thank you. Thank you for letting me be a very small part in walking alongside you as you share your story of resiliency and your story of perseverance.
Thank you.